Welcome to the podcast. Súbele volumen. Conversation with the people who were with me. In the world TV. Carlos Tonight. Historias de un reportero. Carlos Tonight. Dale que viene lo bueno.
Hey everyone, this is Carlos Tonight. Thanks so much for being here. This week, I'm excited to talk with John Sovec. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist with a practice in California. He's also an author and has been featured on Bravo, on OWN, and Fox. He even writes regular columns for the Huffington Post and Good Therapy. John, thanks for being here. How's life in Pasadena?
Thanks. It's great to be here. And things in Pasadena are really beautiful right now. We're kind of in that late spring kind of mixed weather, but it's really nice and my garden's doing fantastic. So
that's great.
Ask for more.
Cool. That's great. Glad to hear that. As you know, June is LGBTQ plus Pride Month, a time to honor the 1969 Stonewall riots. And you're a nationally recognized expert on the topic of creating affirmative support for the LGBTQ plus community. Share with us how you are achieving those goals.
So for myself, I'm an out queer therapist. I'm very prominent in my field. I'm open about my own sexual orientation. And I think that's just a very important place to step forward as an advocate and an activist. For me, it's about going out. I do a lot of speaking engagements. I work with treatment centers and schools and corporates who are trying to, really trying to bring up their LGBTQ awareness. Also here in the state of California, I'm on the Board of Behavioral Sciences, and that's a place to really get and dig into that like policy legislation point. And when I first got on the board, I didn't know I enjoyed that. I have found since that I really dig into this whole like building policy and legislation. It's really cool and interesting to me.
All the fun stuff, right?
Well, I didn't think it was fun, but then when we started doing it, I was like, this is really interesting. And although it takes time, I mean, anyone who has watched a bill go through anything, it takes time, anywhere from 2 to 4 years to get policy to move and change. And yet knowing that stuff I'm doing now may have a positive influence on LGBTQ people in the future, it's really exciting.
Awesome. There's a study that I saw that showed LGBTQ plus people have used mental health services at a 2.5 times higher rate than their heterosexual counterparts. In your opinion, is that number about right? And in general, what are some of the issues that drive people to therapy in the first place?
So I might suggest that it could be even higher to that. One of the things that we look at is as a queer man, as a member of the LGBTQ community, we are all going to go through a process of coming out. It can be a process that's beautiful and easy and supported by a community. It can be a process that's really challenging. It causes a lot of mental angst and a lot of rejection from community. And all of those layers of having to go through that particular process, something our cisgender heteronormative people don't go through, that's going to lead to the potential for a lot of like curiosities and questions about ourselves, our place in the world, and our mental health and well-being. Another thing we know too is that the LGBTQ community is somewhere 20 to 35% reported to have substance use disorders, which is more than triple the national average for substance use disorders. And if you think about it, why do we drink? Why do we, do party drugs? It's a way to escape stuff that feels uncomfortable inside of us. And so I think there are lots of layers and factors that come into play that really make the need for there to be really strong, well-informed LGBTQ therapists and services and communities a number one priority.
Another study that I saw pointed to depression. It said, let's see, as 61% of LGBTQ plus people have depression. Is that, such a big issue in the community?
Well, think about this, especially in the world we're living in right now. We went through a period where LGBTQ affirming practices were very on the forefront. We had the passage of gay marriage as, a federal national project. And now we're looking at a world where people are trying to tear that apart. We have multiple states doing anti-trans bills. We have multiple people trying to remove my right to be married to the person I love. There's lots and lots of activity going on right now. And if you don't think those would be reasons for someone to be depressed, to watch your identity being questioned on a national level on a daily basis is really an intense process to go through.
And when you meet somebody out in the community, and they could be as happy as can be, but you never know that they could be dealing with other stuff, behind closed doors. Um, what are some of the signs for people who may be going through stuff through depression?
Mhm. So I think it's really about looking at quality of life, some of the most basic things. Do you find that that person that you care or love for is starting to isolate quite a bit more? Do you find that they're losing interest in the things that used to make them happy? Do you find them starting to change their eating habits or, changing friend groups pretty dramatically? Do you notice an uptick in substance use? All of those are kind of the real basic pieces of the puzzle we look for. But I think as like someone, like if you care for a loved one and you're curious, is be willing to ask, how are you doing? And not just the normal like checkout stand, like how are you today, but actually being able to sit down with your friends, the people that you love, and say, how are you doing? And to check in, or I know that this bill just passed in this state, this anti-trans. How are you feeling right now? To open a space where those conversations can happen in a supportive, loving manner.
I usually start the podcast with, how are you? And as I was writing that, I was like, that's a loaded question because there could be so many things going on, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think it is. There's that kind of generic social, checkout stand. How are you today? And
Yeah.
they're like, fine. And then there is that real like change that we can make in the world by sitting down with each other and saying, Carlos, how are you today? And really being curious and wanting to be present with that, as one caring human being to another caring human being.
Absolutely. And you talked about, the signs of depression. What if we have a friend and we see those signs, or a family member? What can we do to help?
hmm So, what I think the first thing to step in with is the idea that if you notice it, be willing to step in the space and say, hey, I've noticed there's some changes going on. Are you doing okay? And if they give you that generic, yeah, I'm fine, but you're really noticing the signs, be willing, no, 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 I hear that, but I want to just really check in with you because I'm concerned. And if you need some help or need someone in the future, just know I'm here to help you as best I can and help you find access to resources. I think this ability to actually pause in our really busy lives and check in on people is such a powerful way that we can be there and take care of each other.
Absolutely. I always see, like, when something does happen, the other person, the loved one, would say, oh, I wish I would have reached out, or I wish I would have done this.
Yeah. And what if we made it just a regular thing to reach out, even when we think someone's doing fine, just like, hey, I mean, it feels like a lot of great things are happening right now. How are you doing?
Mhm.
It's like, oh, I'm so excited, but I find by Friday night I'm exhausted. Like, oh, yeah, I get that. Maybe I can cook dinner for you on Friday nights. Like,
Mhm.
what if we made like actively checking in with each other a real part of our relationships in the world? It could be really powerful and beautiful.
Kind of like telling your family members or the people you love every day, hey, I love you. This is what you mean to me.
Yeah. Well, we have a tradition in our household. My husband and I, whenever we leave the house, the last words we say to each other are "I love you."
Mhm.
And it's built on something that's going to sound a little bit morbid, but the idea is if something happened to one of us, but the last words we heard from our partner, "I love you," and the last words we said to our partner were "I love you," that's really a beautiful, beautiful thing to be able to hold on to. Versus like, don't forget to pick up the dog food, which is like, wow,
Take out the
those are the
trash.
last words we had. Okay. But if the last words when we, go about our days is "I love you," it can really hold a lot of power.
And I know that therapy does a lot. Like, say you're depressed, therapy does help. Are there other ways or other things, if somebody doesn't want to go to therapy?
Mhm. So for me, actually, even in my therapeutic process, I think it's a multi-pronged approach where we look at any type of thing that's going on with a person, let's say depression in this case, and we look at it on the aspects of spirit, mind, heart, and body. So let's say you have a friend who, has said, yeah, I'm going through a little bit of depression, but they don't want to do therapy. Okay, so maybe you to commit to taking a walk like a couple of times a week. Maybe you say, hey, you know what, instead of going to get fast food, let's build something a little bit healthier tonight. The basic number one thing that I ask people all the time is, are you drinking enough water? It has a huge effect on our body chemistry. So you can step in and just be that caring person. One of the things we look at about mental wellness is your connection to your community. And I'm not talking like an extroverted way of like you go to every party and you're at everything that happens. But even for an introvert, how are you connected to your community? Do you have a friend group, whether it's big or small? Do you get out and do things that are outdoors in nature? Great healer. Do you do things that are involved in being around a community, even going to like a farmer's market on a Saturday morning? Those types of connections can have a huge influence on our well-being and mental status.
I agree. In recent years, going to see a mental health therapist has become the norm, at least among the people that I know, gay or straight. But there are still many people out there who refuse to see someone. Either they're embarrassed or they don't feel like they need the help. What are the benefits of therapy, and how do you get someone through your doors?
Well, one of the ways I get people through my doors is by doing programs like this and letting them hear a mental health person and realize, wow, they're actually a real person.
Yeah.
They're not some like version I've seen on television sitting in their big chair and smoking a pipe and taking notes and saying, how did that make you feel? But there were real people too. This being able to bring a face to mental health care, I think, is a really powerful tool in stepping up that game. I also think it's about helping people understand that there are all kinds of therapists doing all kinds of approaches. And it's not generic therapy that you have to be afraid of. It's about finding that person who might be the person you're like, wow, I think they could actually listen to me. Because what happens in this room, we set up this space that's very non-judgmental. We set up a space where we can go deeper into conversations that maybe you have in your social life. We create a space where you can explore some of those deeper feelings and thoughts that are taking over your life and safely start to unthread them, to unwind them, and look at ways you would like things to be different going forward. And that's a really powerful experience to be able to have.
A good safe space.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that during the pandemic, people's issues kind of rose? Were they dealing with them more, or did they develop more issues, like let's say alcohol abuse or drug abuse?
So I'm going to go towards the more issue side because what we found is a huge uptick in people trying to access mental health care on all different levels. If you think about what I just said, that one of the ways we look at someone, having strong mental health is their connection to community.
Mm-hmm.
What have we been doing for the last 2.5 years? We have been stricken away from our communities. We've been living in a lot of isolation. And that isolation is not healthy for any person on that multiple spirit, mind, heart, body level that I talk about. And so what we're looking at is even coming out of the pandemic as people are becoming more social, there's still an incredible lack of like, oh, wait, I've just come out of the gopher hole and are you safe? Is the world safe? What do I do? Oh, it's a little bit scary. I retreat back in. People have really lost their social skills on multiple levels. And what we're looking at in the mental health field is, the repercussions of COVID are going to be showing up in the population for the next 5 to 10 years.
Wow. All right. We're talking with John Sovec, a licensed marriage and family therapist who spends a lot of time in the LGBTQ plus community. And as I mentioned, it is Pride Month. So John, let me ask you, do you remember your first ever Pride Parade? And what was that like for you?
We're going back in time, are we? So I have been working and volunteering in the HIV and AIDS field for quite a long time. And one of my very first Pride parades was actually here in Los Angeles, LA Pride. And I was walking with one of the organizations I worked with at that time. And it was really interesting because I had the opportunity to attend Pride in the past and more like, hey, yeah, let's go have some fun. And this was a Pride parade where I actually walked in the parade itself, with a bunch of fellow volunteers who were dedicating their lives to try and early in the HIV/AIDS crisis to provide care and support to people who were dying of this disease. And to be able to walk down the parade route with those beautiful spirits, and then to have the crowd like applaud and cheer for the work that we were doing, I was in tears basically most of the way down the route, because it really made me know that there was more to myself as a queer man and more to our community than just some of the stereotypical things you see. And
Mhm.
I would actually suggest, now that you're bringing this up, that that might have been the moment where I realized wanting to step out and be more of an advocate and an activist really got awoken, because I felt the power of what we could do if we could come together as a community.
Why do you think celebrating Pride is so important?
A lot of times, coming out as gay or bi or trans is a very lonely experience. I'm here in Los Angeles. You know, if you're in like these big cities, maybe you have more support, more opportunities. Maybe there's a bar I can sneak into if I get a fake ID, and you can have those experiences. But all across the country, there are LGBTQ people who are coming out in very small, very isolated communities. And what Pride does is it lets us be seen. It lets us come together. It lets us celebrate the powerful uniqueness of who we are. And for me, it is about creating that connectivity and that visibility.
Absolutely. Do you think that people forget what the parades and the celebrations and marches are all about? And how does the community help people within the community and even outside of it better understand the true meaning of Pride?
There has been like a commercialization of Pride over like the last 10 to 15 years or so. A lot of big corporations came in and started sponsoring and, producing some of the Pride events. And over the last couple of years, there's been a real pushback against that. And what we're finding is the community is taking ownership of Pride again. It is about sometimes the smaller, like, Trans Day of Remembrance, which here in LA is the Friday before, like the big Pride weekend. And it's like, so how do we make sure that we connect with that community and support all members of our community? Understanding that it's not just about like getting your wristband and, taking your shirt off and dancing for a weekend, which is beautiful and powerful as well too. But it's also about being willing to talk to and experience all of the information that's available that holds the history of our community, which can once again allow us to connect on a level that is deep and beautiful and can fulfill us.
I've covered many Pride parades and attended many Pride parades. And I noticed that there's a lot of straight families that go to these events, these parades. What are some of the reasons that people attend, let's say, a Pride parade?
For some people, it's because we throw a really good party. For others, it's to be an ally, to simply show up and be there. And for others, it is about supporting a loved one. I have a beautiful story. I have a book that's going to be coming out, I believe, next spring. It's at the publishers right now. And it is about parents supporting their LGBTQ kids in the coming out process. And in the book, I share a story about a kid who had come out. We had worked for a while, and he identified that he really wanted to go to his first Pride parade. He, at that time, was 16, so parents were a little bit reticent about letting him just go there by himself. So after some family conversations, mom committed to going to Pride with him. And it was such a beautiful experience for both of them, that she got to see her son come alive in his community, that she got to see multiple facets and hues and shapes and sizes of our community. And my favorite moment of this story is when mom came back and we were talking, she said, and I didn't realize there were so many hot men out there. And I was like, yeah, there's a reason to get people to go to Pride,
You mentioned earlier going to Pride is kind of a form of just being seen. Talk about how Pride makes people feel. You mentioned you were marching and walking with fellow volunteers. What was that feeling like, just being there, being in the moment?
It was electrifying, down to my toes. there was so much energy from the crowd. There was so much energy from my fellow volunteers. There was this sense of freedom and recognition to my heart just exploding, like feeling so much love from the people that I was there with. And that high stayed with me for like weeks on end. And as I said earlier, it also, triggered a part of me that I didn't know that I was ready to be so public facing in
Yeah.
my queer identity, and encouraged me to move that way. For a lot of people, coming to their first Pride can be really scary.
Mhm.
And sometimes it is a very, let's call it a shy experience where we attend, but we kind of make ourselves a little bit invisible because we just want to experience the community and see where we might fit into it. And so there are all levels of experiences and emotional journeys that people can go through in this process.
Mhm.
And I think it is almost a rite of passage in the LGBTQ community to attend a Pride and really understand and find out where your community is.
Mhm. You have to attend at least one, right?
Yes.
So if you can go back into the time machine again, do you have a favorite Pride parade that you've been to, in what city?
So yes, that is right on the tip of my tongue. So here in Los Angeles, there's an area called Long Beach. It's a smaller community. It's right on the coast, and they used to do Long Beach Pride. And at that time, it was this really cool, really small event. And it was booths of people in the community who were making jewelry or printing shirts in their garage. And there was food that was being made by like local restaurants. But the best thing about this Pride for me is watching the number of families there with their kids in strollers coming out and buying a Pride bracelet or getting some food and sitting down on the grass and just enjoying their day. And whether those people were straight or gay or trans or bi, no one would know. But it was everybody coming together in this really small, intimate, community-based Pride. And that to me is the one that I will always hold on to.
That's awesome. If somebody asked you, which city should I go and check out a Pride parade this year, what would you say?
Depends on what you're looking for. There are all kinds of levels. You could go to New York and kind of go to the big, grandparent of the Pride parade here
Where it all
in the
started, right?
country. You can come to LA. You could look at going someplace like Palm Springs or San Diego, which are a little bit more community oriented. I think it's about finding what you want your Pride event to be. I would imagine that in each state and each city that are holding Pride events, they're going to have a different flavor, a different feel. So what's going to feel authentic to you? I want to go to the big city and I want to party. Then find that. I'm a little bit anxious and I want to just step into the community on a more intimate level. Then find that more local one. There is a Pride for everyone. You just got to find the one that feels authentic for you.
Absolutely. I'm talking with John Sovec, a licensed marriage and family therapist who works in the LGBTQ community. It's Pride Month. John, before you became a therapist, you had an entirely different life, right? Tell us about that.
Oh, you've been digging around a little bit, haven't you? Yeah. So I actually had a career as a performer from a very young age, both on television, mostly on stage, a little bit of film work, traveled the country, did a lot of shows, national tours, worked at Disney for quite a long time, and just got out there doing the singing, dancing, acting thing, having a great time doing it.
That's so cool. Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, oh, I got to ask her about that. So what was that like for you? I mean, I'm sure you had so much fun.
It did. It was such a great experience. It was a place where I felt at home from a very young age. I enjoyed the process of like putting a show together. And for my journey, it was great being able to travel, not just around the country, but also around the world with shows and have travel experience I probably never could have paid for on my own at that time.
It's a great
And to be
experience.
able to, on days off, just walk out the hotel and turn either right or left and explore cities that I'd never been in before, to meet people on tour and to make friendships that have lasted a lifetime. It's a really beautiful and fun and playful and exciting career to move in.
Awesome. Not only do I like people who appreciate the arts, but I have so much respect for those who are actually on stage and performing and sharing their talent. How much do you miss that life?
It's interesting because when I was ready to leave performing, I actually got an opportunity from Disney to move into entertainment management. So it took me off of like the stage and into more of a creative position. And it was a really beautiful transition for me to have, to realize that, as a singer, dancer, actor, you're not necessarily expected to be incredibly smart. You're just expected to do.
Right.
Moving into this job gave me a chance to remind myself that I was actually smart. And that, I think, is the transition that then allowed me to say, you know what, I'm ready to move on. And that's when I headed out to grad school, because all these years I had been doing all of this work in the HIV and AIDS community. And it seemed like just such a natural transition to take that work and codify it, go to school, learn more about all of the science behind it, and move into being a therapist. So the layers of this all stack one on top of the other. And it's been a beautiful journey so far.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask you how you use some of that talent and experience into what you do now.
Well, if you think about it, in the therapy room, it's basically a really intense improv.
Right.
Because I have to be able to listen, to be aware, to pick up on where my client is going, to notice if, we're going too deep, if we know to go a little bit deeper, to be able to be aware of all of those aspects of what's going on in the room. And I would suggest that my experience as a performer allows me to stay really, really present in all of that and not get overwhelmed by it. The other aspect too, maybe, I don't know if you missed this in the research, is I'm also a yoga teacher and have been for quite a long time.
Oh, I did miss that.
Yeah. So all of that yoga energy, that mindfulness, that wellness, that somatic body approach is a big part of the work that I do as well. So I would suggest that everything that I've experienced so far in my own life does come into the therapy room and allows me to have all kinds of different approaches that I can do with each client.
So if someone asked you to go back to performing and you had the opportunity to, would you?
At this time, I would have to say no. I love going to see shows and saying, oh, if I were still performing, I'd probably be in that show. But at this point, I would suggest that most of that has been fulfilled, and I'm happy to be in the audience.
Awesome. Yeah, I hear you. So how can people connect with you? How can they find you?
So you can find me through my website, which is johnsovec.com, JOHNSOVEC.com. You can find me on Twitter at John Sovec, and you can find me on Instagram at John Sovec Therapy.
Great. And I will include that in the show notes so people can find you and connect with you. John, thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate your time. God bless you.
Thank you. It's been beautiful chatting with you.
And happy Pride.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for checking out the podcast. This episode was written and produced by yours truly, Carlos Correa. My theme is by Skin Gales. Visit carlostonight.com for the very latest on the podcast. Check out past episodes, see who's coming on next, and sign up for my newsletter. That's carlostonight.com.